Hi everyone, Joe Carrig with the Carrig Real Estate Team, and this is your San Ramon Valley Real Estate and Neighborhood Update for the week of July 11th. You know, one of the questions I always get, Joe, is this getting into a recession? Is the real estate prices dropping? One thing to remember is there's a big difference between a correction and a reversal of prices dropping. A correction, they say, is when prices drop 10%. So what's happened in our market is, you know, the market went up and up and up and up. So what happens when it slows down, the first thing is we get the pullback of the last increase. So let's say homes are selling for $2 million, and then all of a sudden one sells for 2.2. Well, when the market slows down, what we like to talk about, and you'll see in the slides, a deceleration. Well, what happens is it falls back to that 2 million. So the last increase doesn't stick. So what we're in right now is kind of a correction, and it's kind of a hot mess right now because a lot of people purchased when prices were higher. So if you have that person that basically your home was listed at 2 million and they bought it for 2.3, now all of a sudden it's worth 2 million again, and they're in escrow with it. Well, you don't have to be a mathematician to figure out that, okay, prices dropped 300,000 and you're risking a $60,000 deposit. So there's a lot of renegotiating going on, people pulling out of transactions. But you'll see in the next 30 days as things normalize a little bit, which you'll see in the slides, that it's starting to normalize a little bit more. But after the correction happened, that we won't have that as much because now we're getting more into transparent pricing, a normal real estate market where something will sell for 2 million, we put it on for 2 million, it's worth 2 million, it will sell for 2 million. So the biggest question is, how did we get where we're at right now? Well, obviously, we always knew there was going to be a correction in the market, and a lot of what's driving this is interest rates. So let's dive into the slides, and let's talk about recessions, interest rates, because here's the thing. We are probably in right now, since I started selling real estate 45 years ago, our 7th recession. You know, I sold real estate through the last 6, and you'll see the slides that say it doesn't mean that prices are going to go down just because we're in a recession. People just remember 2008. So again, one thing to remember you'll see with the interest rates is when you're in a recession, and we'll probably officially be in a recession in the next month or two. Remember, they define a recession by 2 straight quarters of the GDP going down. We had the first quarter go down. When they come out with the numbers next month on the second quarter, probably that's going to go down. We'll officially be in a recession, but for the most part we are right now. But let's look at the interest rates and what's really driving a lot of this right now. Well, let's look at the first slide. Throughout history during a recessionary period, interest rates go up at the beginning of the recession, but in order to come out of a recession, interest rates are lowered to stimulate the economy moving forward. Historically, we've seen a rapid uptick in interest rates followed by lower interest rates. So what we're seeing out there in the financing market, you know, because interest rates are so high, people are getting offered now a 5-year fix, 7-year fix, 10-year fix, and they're sitting there going, oh, Joe, I always heard you should do a 30-year fix. I'll tell you right now, a 5-year fix or even a 7-year fix, and especially a 10-year fix, you're completely safe. Because what the government does, they manipulate the market. Right now, they have to push us into a recession just to make up for all the money spent, just because of the inflation based on all the money that's been printed the last couple years. So really what they're doing is they're raising interest rates to push us into a recession, to bring the inflation down. Then once they get the market, that's where they talk about a soft landing, which very rarely happens. But if they have that landing, then when they have to pull us out of the recession, they'll lower the interest rates back down. And certainly we'll probably be in this recession for a couple years, but in a couple years, you're going to see interest rates come back down as they have. So when you look at this, the next slide, you'll see this, exactly what we're talking about, that during these recessions, you know, during obviously the 80s and the early 90s and the 2000s, you'll see that going into the recession, interest rates went up, you know, the curve, the inflation. And then coming out, interest rates went down. You see it right here, 1980, 16% to 11%, and then 81, 82, 18 to 13, and then the COVID from 3.8 to 2.8 just since 2020, but you'll see that on the graphs all the way through the last 6 recessions. And again, this is a graph I showed you a couple weeks ago. The recession doesn't mean real estate prices going down. Matter of fact, if you look at 4 of the last 6 recessions, real estate prices actually went up. You know, we were in a recession during the COVID. Well, real estate prices continue to go up, as we all know, and it's only 1991 where it went down 1.9%, which basically, you know, stayed the same. We only have the 2008 recession where prices dropped significantly. And the reason they did is because the real estate drove us into the recession in 2008. But so don't expect prices. Yes, we had a correction, but don't necessarily think prices are going to continue to drop. Now, don't necessarily think they're going to continue to go up either. But we'll see in the graphs, just when we talk about the San Ramon Valley, how it's affecting the market right now. So if you look at the next one, offers received are down, offers over asking are down, sales are down, but inventory is up, obviously. But, you know, when we talk about existing home sales, take a look at this. You know, based on where the market is right now, they expect to have about 5.4 million sales. And people are going, oh my God, sales are way down. Well, yeah, last year, which was nuts, was 6.1, but in 2020, it was 5.6. And you look at 17, 18, and 19, it was all about the same or even a little bit less. So we're really more in a normalized market as far as sales. You can't compare it to last year, which is just kind of nuts. Home sales have essentially returned to the levels in 2019 prior to the pandemic after 2 years of just gangbuster performance. So when we talk about deceleration home prices, I love this analogy I heard. So let's say, for instance, you're going 60 miles an hour and you go around a corner and 3 blocks ahead you see a cop car and you're going 60 in a 45. Well, what do? Well, you don't slam on your brakes because you got 3 blocks, but you're going to decelerate. And that's what the market is doing right now. It's decelerating. It's not slamming on the brakes, which you'll see when we go into the graphs. Single-family housing units completed. As I always talked about, the reason we're not going to be in 2008, there was 2 million new home construction units in inventory. Right now, the builders can't even keep up. We're short, and here's why we're short. After 2008, where a lot of builders went out of business and they quit building, sawmills went out of business. That's why lumber is so expensive right now. So for 14 years, we had a situation where they were building 400 to 500,000 homes less than they would in a typical year. So over the last 14 years, we're about 6 million homes short on where we would normally be. The other thing that the reason the market isn't going to drop like 2008 is the millennials. You can see in the graph, the millennials are in a peak of their buying time right now, even more than the baby boomers. So we still have that demand, and we still have interest rate historically low, and we still have a lack of home, no inventory on the market. Plus, as I talked about before, if you're in a home, most of the people's interest rate right now is 2.5 to 3 to 3.5, and now they're 5 to 6. So if you moving out of state or you have to downsize, go from 2 stories to single stories, great, you're going to move. But people are not just going to move and trade a 3% interest rate for a 6% interest rate. So you're not going to see as much inventory come on the market for that reason also. So if we look at the next graph, experts don't believe the market's in a bubble or a crash is in the cards, like during the Great Recession. That was 2008. The nation is still suffering from a housing shortage that has reached crisis proportions at a time where many millennials are reaching the age where they'll start to consider home ownership. That's likely to keep prices up there. Look at the month's inventory of homes for sale. This is what's so funny, and to give you an example, look at going all the way back to 2019, the months of inventory, where it basically averaged in the 3s and the 4s. So here's what has happened the last 3 months. Our inventory levels nationwide have gone from 1.5 months to 2.5 months. Just so you guys understand, to get anything less than 6 months of inventory is a seller's market. So we actually have been, since 2019, as you guys have been in a seller's market. That's because it's been 3 to 4. So we've gone up from basically 2.2 to 2.6, and from a low, the very lowest, 1.6 to 2.6. So we are still in a seller's market as far as inventory compared to demand, supply compared to demand. And the other thing too to know is, they say nationwide there's 350,000 homes on the market, which is twice as many as there was 3 months ago. And you say, wow, there's twice as much inventory. Do you know what normal inventory would be right now? 1.2 million. So even though we're twice as much as we were, we're still only 30% of what we normally would be. So that kind of shows you how bad it was and why prices went up 30% just this year. There were no homes on the market. And then again, with this graph, you see the month's inventory of homes just going back the last 12 months. So let's dive into the actual graphs and see where the market is. So let's look at San Ramon. Well, you see the inventory obviously actually dropped a couple weeks ago, then it went up a little bit. But here's the important thing to know. Look at the pending sales. The pending sales are staying pretty consistent across the board. So homes are still selling. You know, it's kind of settled down. If you remember when we started this correction, we saw inventory jump way up and we saw pending sales go down. Now what we're kind of seeing is things have kind of stabilized. Now that the market has backed off and done its correction, things have kind of stabilized. Plus, interest rates, as you saw, you know, a couple weeks ago, are literally dropped to where they were 2 months ago. So they went up and up and up, and then they went back down. And people go, well, how could that happen, Joe? The Federal Reserve just raised it, you know, 75 basis points, almost 1%. Well, remember, as we talked about 2 weeks ago, the interest rate that the Federal Reserve does is the money that they loan to the banks. It affects your car loans, your credit cards. It doesn't affect home mortgages. It does a little bit, you know, some falls through the cracks, but for the most part, it doesn't affect home mortgages. And when you saw it pump up, what the banks did is they baked in what they knew was going to happen. And now that they saw what happened, they came down a little bit more. So interest rates, even though they're higher, have basically kind of stabilized. You can see inventory is kind of stabilized, and the pending sales have kind of stayed the same. So look at San Ramon, look at Danville, same type of thing. Inventory staying about the same, it's not jumping up, and pending sales have stayed somewhat the same. Same thing when you look at the Blackhawk market. Active properties have stayed about the same, actually gone down a little bit, and pending sales have stayed the same. Alamo, inventory's gone up a little bit, pending sales have gone down a little bit, but for the most part, you can see that the market has somewhat stabilized. So we saw the correction in Alamo, Danville on an average 5%, 10%. San Ramon, because those prices have went up so fast, you know, you basically probably have seen 10 to 20%. And they say, people go, what's a correction, Joe? Anytime prices drop more than 10%, it's considered a correction. So we're, for the most part, in a correction market. You can see Dublin, the same type of thing, where actives and pendings have almost stayed the same the last 3 weeks. So that's, looking at it, that's a stable market. When you're not seeing a lot of, you know, inventory going up, pending sales going down. So the thing is that we've talked about, if you guys remember, 3 months ago at the peak, things were selling for 115 to 120% of asking. What did I tell you 3 weeks ago? I said, wait till the end of the month, and it actually happened a week earlier, and everything's going to be selling for about 100% of asking, like it was at the beginning of 2021. And sure enough, look at it. San Ramon, 99%. Danville, 101%. Blackhawk, 98%. Alamo, 102%. Dublin, 99%. So everything's selling at about 100% of asking. But that really isn't a clear picture, because what happens is we're seeing at least a dozen price reductions a day through the San Ramon Valley. So you have a situation where if a home's $2 million and then they lower it to 1.8 and then it sells for 1.8, well, statistically that's going to show that it sold for 100% of asking, but it really didn't. It ended up selling really at 90% of where it started. So again, you're even going to see that go away, price reductions go away as sellers understand that their pricing has to be a little bit more transparent. So every market is different, you know, from city to city, from neighborhood to neighborhood. You know, if you have a real estate need, put my 45 years of experience navigating through 6 recessions and helping you navigate through the 7th one that we're in now. Give me a call, Joe Carrig, 925-487-6838, or drop me an email, joe@carrigteam.com, or visit our website to look at our properties we have, learn a little bit more about us, www.carrigteam.com. It's never more important right now to have an expert in your corner with a changing market that can analyze your situation, work out a plan, and make it happen for you in today's market. Thanks, have a great day, and we'll see you next week.